What's up, guys? Connor OHanlon here for another episode of the Greater Society podcast. And tonight we are going back to some roots and we're going to go over like 20 different things tonight. So, no guests tonight. We do have a planned guest for next week, but you'll have to stay tuned a little bit later for me to tell you who we have planned for next week. Which, more reason to hang out in the chat, and you could throw your guest guesses in the chat if you uh so dare take a gander or a guess at the guest stumbling over. So tonight we're going to be talking about, as you can tell by the name of this episode, number one, the PA Dems are passing or have passed this week the Fairness Act. We will go over what that means, what is in the bill, and what we can expect. I also may or may not show another clip, as we do so very often on this show, of Malcolm Kenyatta. I happened to tune in while they were debating a bill to pass union protections here in Pennsylvania, and I just thought, I was like, this has got to get recorded. So we might take a look at that as well. Then we'll discuss, piggybacking off of labor rights here, the Workers Guild of America going on strike, what that means for shows, movies, and what it means to show solidarity, and why people like Ben Shapiro are trying to dunk on the writers at the same time. Then we have Tucker Carlson's text messages being leaked. Videos of those, I'm not gonna, some of the videos are like less important, some of the text messages are more important, and we're gonna continue to see this stuff leak out as time goes on. Maybe not last, but somewhere in the towards the end of all this, we're gonna talk about Bernie Sanders going on one of the morning talk shows, or talking with Chris Wallace, who for some reason is at CNN, even though he was Fox for so long doing his thing, but talking about how billionaires will, quote, be just fine with $999 million in yearly income, and go through that, what that all means. But all that being said, let's dive right into main chunk of what I want to talk about today, which is the PA Democrats passing the Fairness Act. Now, some of you may already know this, but we'll take a little bit of a history lesson while we're here. In the 1960s, as we all are aware, there was the civil rights movement. And in 1964 and 1965, you had both the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, respectively, passed in those years. The Civil Rights Act in 1964 prevented federal discrimination based on race, religion, I believe sex, and color, a few other things. Vitally, what was left out of that today's society is gender and sexual orientation. What also, not vital to today necessarily, but at the time, which was overlooked and was, passed in future administrations, was people with disabilities, which there you also got the expansion of the Civil Rights Act. I believe in the 70s was the first time, and then in the 90s again, you get the Americans with Disabilities Act, which expands protections for people with disabilities. Now, we live in a country where there is no federal protection. There are no federal protections based on gender identity and sexual orientation, or gender expression, gender orientation. All these, the phrasing of these words get legal real quick when you want to talk about this stuff. But specifically, sexual orientation, gender identity / expression are not protected classes based on the Civil Rights Act. Before we dive into what happened this week, let me quickly describe what it means to be a protected class. This is important to note because I'll just use it as an example. Okay, I'll use myself as an example so nobody can get upset. But a lot of people, a lot of right wingers to be specific, like to say, "Oh, there's discrimination against white people or men or whatever," right? Because of intersectional feminism or because of Black Lives Matter or because of whatever reasoning they think that there is, right? So when we look at the reality of this, being within a protected class, so let's just use race for this example. I am a white man. If I were to be discriminated against because I am a white man, let's just say a job didn't want to hire me and an accounting firm didn't want to hire me, even though I'm a CPA, I have my accounting degree, I have experience. They just said, we don't want to hire you because you are white. Well, in America, because race is a protected class, you have protections federally from being discriminated against in employment, in housing, and in a few other different areas. And some of them are lackluster, but they exist. Okay. Now, I will put an asterisk here and say that there are always exceptions to these rules. So you might think, okay, well, what if I wanted to cast a certain person to like a certain actor, or let's even go more specific. I wanted to cast somebody to play Martin Luther King Jr. in a movie, and we want them to be African American. There are exceptions to discrimination laws to say, okay, these are carve outs to say within reason, these are certain things that can happen. But on the whole, discrimination based on race, sex, religion are federally protected classes. So if you were fired wrongfully for being, as in my example, if I was fired for being white, or I wasn't hired for being white, or I wasn't able to go to a school for being white, or anything right like that, because race is a protected class, I'd be able to sue and receive damages and all that stuff, right? We all understand it. I think on the abstract, we talk about the Civil Rights Act and the rights era as my computer is freaking out. But protections created for African Americans specifically because they didn't have the same protections. They had, the separate but equal clause that was put in through the Jim Crow era, and the it wasn't was it Plessy versus Ferguson? Brown versus Board of Education, I believe. Actually, one of them was the one that implemented. One was the one that overturned it. But all that to say, needed these protections in the past for those reasons. We need them now and in the future for other classes and other reasons. First of all, being that the United States doesn't protect transgender, gay, bi, or any sort of queer identities in civil rights law. So what happens is it gets delegated down to the states. Now, many of you know, and we're obviously talking about Pennsylvania today, but I live in Pennsylvania, and this is a focus of the program. But in Pennsylvania, there are no protections from being fired, from housing discrimination, from a number of different things on a state level based on sexual orientation, gender expression. So, a lot of people that run for office run on this idea. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're finally going to get it passed. Well, the Democrats finally took control, as we've talked about in past episodes, finally took control of the state house here in Pennsylvania. And they passed what they call the PA Fairness Act, which includes civil rights protections for sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. This is awesome. And I'm going to show you, here we have, this is the vote. Here's Malcolm Kenyatta, who led the effort on this with a few other state representatives. And also, I'll point out, there are former allies. Let's see. I want to see if he shouts them out here. Or they're they are allies. Here's Eric Gutschall, friend, not just of the show, but of mine. But yes, you see, like, Malcolm giving a shout out to Brian Sims, who was also interviewed on the program previously. The ACLU, the HRC. I believe it was Dan Frankel was one of the first people to propose this bill here in Pennsylvania. And he, once there were queer lawmakers that he could kind of pass the ball to and say, here, run with this, they finally did. And after years, Malcolm's been in there for years, Brian was there for years, they finally passed this bill. Here's the actual vote, right? Look at it. Awesome. 102 to 98. Now, does this mean that there are protections here in Pennsylvania now for gay individuals, for transgender individuals, for non-binary individuals? Unfortunately, the answer is no. Because we have a split Congress. If you think back to your Schoolhouse Rock days, the bill doesn't become a law until you get both the state or the Senate and the House and the governor, in this case the governor, to sign the bill into law. So, the state Senate, which is controlled by the Republicans, won't pass this. But it is still noteworthy to say we are inching closer. This is what good governance looks like. I commented that on Representative Tim Brennan, who I ran against in the primary against. I commented on his Facebook page. I said, this is what good governance looks like, because Democrats are leading the way and fighting for, instead of what Republicans are doing by stripping women of their reproductive rights, formerly constitutionally protected rights, rather than going after reproductive drugs that protect women, that protect trans men, that protect the right to choose in this country, that protect a constitutional right or a former constitutional right, the Republicans have stripped it back. Democrats in the state house and in the federal Congress eventually will stand up to expand rights for Pennsylvanians, for Americans, because everybody deserves to be treated fairly. Regardless of your gender expression or identity, regardless of your sexual orientation, this is a step in the right direction. This is the way to get things done. You pass it in the state house. We keep showing what we're standing for. And eventually, when the Democrats take the majority in the state Senate, there will be protections for our LGBTQ plus friends and family. It will happen. You have to believe it and you have to will it into existence, but you cannot just hope. You cannot just pray. You have to take action. You have to find somebody that you can invest time, money, effort into, get them elected, and fight for you. I will point out, if you, let's just say you don't have the money, you can't go, you can't find the way to contact your state representative somehow. It's easy. You should go do that. But if you can't, maybe your state representative is a Republican and they just don't want to have anything to do with it. Here's what you do. You care about expansion of civil rights, go to your local government. Every local municipal government has the right to ban discrimination beyond what the Civil Rights Act proposes and protects. So, for example, if you were someone like me back in 2019, or former guest of the show, Dan Wood, who is a township supervisor in Doylestown Township, guess what? There are no protections in that municipality for people in the LGBTQ plus community solely based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, if you went where I live now, Doylestown Borough, there are protections for those in that community and in that group and in those classes more broadly. Because the Doylestown Borough government, Democratic. Doylestown Township one is Republican. So you can see with two towns, actually, I mean, Doylestown Township actually engulfs Doylestown Borough. If you live on one side of the street, you can be discriminated against. If you live on the other, you cannot. You have the protections that you deserve. That is the way that you can go and make things happen. Now, if you live in New Jersey or you live in certain states that have these protections, that's great. But if you don't, and you should look up, if your state has protections, if the state won't pass them, your local government should. And if your local government won't, then you should run for your local government, or you should find somebody to unseat those people and run on that issue. Make it an issue. Gay conversion therapy is not banned in Doylestown Township, I'll have you know. Something that I ran on in 2019. Making sure that we protect LGBTQ individuals and the community at large. Children that are trying to be taught that somehow it's grooming to just say it's okay to be who you are, but if we tell you that you have to repent and you are, put into gay conversion therapy, that is not grooming. That is ridiculous. So get involved locally, as the show is a big advocate for. Find the pinpoint in which you can pressure your local government. Talk with your local township manager, the borough manager, somehow make it happen. Just Google your local government and you can do it. You can really get this thing done. It's not that hard to I don't think on the average reasonable person it's not that hard to get through. So let's reset and just take a look at this poll, which I thought was funny. It's funny because the tweet I'm pulling this from is Lauren Southern, who is a known far-right, borderline white nationalist person. Canadian, but before I go to this poll, let me look at the chat. Why does this administration hire solely based on race instead of competence? Well, Guitar, I happen to know who you are, but if you actually believe that, you wouldn't be able to look at the administration and say, okay, this person's unqualified. Let's, for example, look at this. I am pulling up this is somebody, you'll see it says acting Secretary of Labor, Julie Sue. Julie Sue was filling in for somebody who was the labor secretary, and I believe just resigned. Nothing crazy or anything like that. 2.5 years into the job. Okay. She became the acting labor secretary in March. Now, if I were to use Guitar 69's logic, Julie Sue is apparently not competent at her job. In fact, Republicans actually used this argument against her in a confirmation hearing against Senator Bernie Sanders, who is the chair, I believe, of one of the boards that control labor, basically. And it just so happens that she is one of the most qualified and competent people to ever be in this position. So let's take a look. As California Labor, I'm reading, so I have to turn my head. Sorry. As California Labor Commissioner from 2011 through 2018, Sue enforced state's labor laws to ensure a fair and just workplace for both employees and employers, A report on her tenure released in May 2013 found that her leadership resulted in a renaissance in enforcement activity and record-setting results. In 2014, she launched the first Wage Theft is a Crime multimedia, multilingual statewide campaign to reach out to low-wage workers and their employers to help them understand their rights and feel safe speaking up about their labor law abuses. So the list goes on. You can go to dol.gov/agencies/OSEC to learn more about Julie Su. Now, again, it says acting secretary because the Republicans will not confirm her to be the labor secretary, plus Joe Manchin. So if somebody that was labor secretary in the state of California, which is the largest state in the United States, for 8 years, she's not qualified, she is not, quote, competent, then I don't know what to tell you. Because if that's what you don't, if you think that somebody that already served in the largest state the third largest economy in the world, basically, top 10 at least, is not competent to be labor secretary, which is appointed by Joe Biden, then you might not be competent to have graduated from kindergarten. You could go down the list. There are a number of people. Now the problem is that people want to say that there's no white people in there. That's not even true. That's not true. But if we were talking about, all right, here's another one. What about Rachel Levine or the Department of Transportation, who should be responsible for oil disaster? Number one, Rachel Levine is a public health official. She served in Pennsylvania as a public servant during COVID and did a pretty damn good job about it. When we talk about Pete Buttigieg, I'm not a big Pete Buttigieg fan, but also let's look at it. The dude is a white guy, a young white dude. So you can't even possibly say he got hired based on race. He got hired because he was a mayor of a reasonably sized town and city and ran a campaign for president. And frankly, sometimes that's how things work out. And Secretary of Transportation, mostly what's important is the people that work under the secretary anyway. So just pointing that out. And it's the same, yes, as Lindsay points out in chat, it's the same right-wing talking point about Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. The same arguments are consistently brought up because, God forbid, we find competent people that happen to be Asian or black or Hispanic or gay or transgender. Because I got news for you. It's not just white men that are competent. And a lot of white men aren't competent. The same way that a lot of people in other classes and races are not competent. It goes both ways. Not everybody from every background is competent to do a specific job. That's fair. But that's not what you're saying. And that's not what Republicans are saying. If you were just to say, oh, why didn't we do this guy or this person or this woman or, whatever, that's a different debate. But to blanket say that, oh, Julie Su is not really competent, even though she's been the labor secretary in California for 8 years, we just hired her because of her race, is absolutely ludicrous. Yeah. Let's go to pull this up. Okay. Speaking of Republicans getting triggered, here is a CBS News YouGov poll that looked at likely Republican voters in the primary. So remember, these projections are slightly different. They're not always the same as who will actually vote. They're not exit polling because there hasn't been any polling yet for I'm sorry, there hasn't been any voting yet for the 2024 primary. But if you look at this, it says Republicans' top answers on what will make them choose which candidate to support. 85%. This is so ridiculous. But this piggybacks off of my buddy Guitar 69's concerns. 85% say the candidate that challenges woke ideas, which, of course, they can't define what woke is. 66% said, I would like a candidate that opposes any gun restrictions. 61% says Trump won in 2020. I want to emphasize that one more time. 61% of likely GOP primary voters polled in this YouGov poll said that they want their candidate to deny that Joe Biden won a free and fair and the factually proven to be the most secure election in the United States history. 61%. Now, 57%, this is the last thing. And get ready, all you liberals. And if you're progressive, it's okay. I'm a progressive. I don't know if I'd call myself a liberal, but progressives, they might slide off okay. 57% of likely GOP primary voters said they prefer their top candidate based on the one that makes liberals angry. So, run down this list. You can probably pick why Donald Trump is destroying Ron DeSantis, Ron DeSanctimonious, 8-Ball Ron. But at the same time, understand that if Trump broked on the golf course, that Ron DeSantis would fill in these shoes and check these boxes. So regardless, we should be aware, be hyper-vigilant, and understand this is what they're voting on. Sheesh. Man. Not good. Not good. Not good. Let's take a look at Mr. Carlson. Mr. Carlson. So this is, I'm gonna have to zoom in. It's a long text. Okay. So I'm just gonna cut back to me real quick. I'll intro it for you guys. For those who have not seen or heard it yet. There was a text. And there's been multiple videos. The videos are kind of just blah. It's just Tucker Carlson saying like Media Matters sucks and, you know, F this guy and Fox Nation sucked or whatever. And they were what they were. Allegedly, the text message that I'm about to show you is partly the reason that Fox News fired now former host Tucker Carlson. Now, I don't buy this. A lot of people, I think, can see that this is not the end-all be-all of this situation. If you've been paying attention, you'll know that there are more and more things coming out every day. But this is what has been said as part of the reason, at least, that came out in the Dominion lawsuit as evidence for why Tucker Carlson fired. I'll read it here for you listening. I'm gonna hide the date. Don't no spoilers there yet, but I'll say why it's important after. Okay. A text message from Tucker to, I believe, one of his producers or somebody that works on the show. Quote, A couple of weeks ago, I was watching video of people fighting on the street in Washington. A group of Trump guys surrounded an Antifa kid and started, and Antifa, that's the way Trump says it, Antifa kid, and started pounding the living shit out of him. It was 3 against 1 at least. Jumping a guy like that is dishonorable, obviously. It's not how white men fight. Key part there. Quote, and I will repeat it. It is not how white men fight. Yet suddenly I found myself rooting for the mob against the man, hoping they'd hit him harder, kill him. I really wanted them to hurt the kid. I could taste it. Then somewhere deep in my brain an alarm went off. This isn't good for me. I'm becoming something I don't want to be. The Antifa creep is a human being. Much as I despise what he says and does, much as I'm sure I'd hate him personally if I knew him, I shouldn't gloat over his suffering. I should be bothered by it. I should remember that somewhere somebody probably loves this kid and would be crushed if he was killed. If I don't care about those things, if I reduce people to their politics, how am I better than he is? Pause there. Tucker is suggesting that this is not how, quote, white men fight. That's the first thing. There you go with, oh, but Tucker Carlson's not a white nationalist. He's not a white supremacist. Immediately racializing something, immediately jumping to this as this white versus black concept. The second thing is that why in the hell is Tucker Carlson sending these like soliloquies and asides to people that work for him? Why is he sending this stuff? He obviously feels comfortable saying some of this stuff. Not that, text messages are always leaked or they're public, but still, on some level, he feels comfortable saying this stuff. And it's not like he's joking. So, that's number 2. Number 3 is that somehow Tucker Carlson grows a sense of empathy halfway through it. He grows a sense of empathy halfway through it for an Antifa member, a supposed Antifa member, and feels bad for him. And he has empathy for some reason, which he somehow doesn't have for any transgender individual. He doesn't have for any gay individual. He doesn't have for anybody that's involved with Black Lives Matter. He has no empathy for progressives in any case. But somehow he watches a guy get beat up and he feels bad for him. Fair enough. I feel bad for people when they get beat up, mostly in TikTok videos or viral Twitter videos or World Star stuff that comes across my feed. But what is one final important thing to note here? Well, look at the date. Look at the date that he is sending this. Tucker Carlson is sending this like aside, this Shakespearean aside, where he finally comes to realize that he should have empathy with somebody after completely racializing and being a bigot on January 7th, 2021. Now, I don't know if you all remember, there may not have been something that was kind of a big deal that happened on January 6th, 2021. Where maybe some of the people that he was talking about may or may not have allegedly stormed the Capitol building to try and hang the vice president and overthrow the government and overturn a free and fair election. Just a small thing. But beyond that, we also have, as I pull it up, this clip as I'm filibustering from Mehdi Hassan's show on MSNBC. Mehdi has been doing great work, I have to say. But he put together on his show why this text message is obviously not the reason he got fired, because Tucker's white nationalism has been on full display for a very, very long time.
White supremacy, that's the problem. This is a hoax. There's no evidence that white supremacists were responsible for what happened on January 6th. That's a lie. We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, they tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided.
So that was a key one. That last one was a key one. But again, these are the people that falsely wrap themselves in the flag. They use American symbology, and this is why we have to take that stuff back from them. The Statue of Liberty literally says, bring me your poor, you're weak, you're sick. But no, that's not for everybody, according to Tucker, because he thinks that immigrants make the country dirty.
Demographic.
Remember the Great Replacement theory? Was a conspiracy theory? It sounds more like a statistical fact.
Ilhan Omar is living.
Also, something that I wish I actually talked with Bradley Sherman last week, as we talked about demographic destiny and talking about how young people are going to shape the future of the country. And yes, immigrants are going to shape the future of the country, but it's not going to be this horrible overturning of Americana and all these people that don't respect America are invading the country. Oh no, my lake house. Tucker Carlson's losing his 4 houses from all these, none of that's happening. None of that's happening.
Being proof that the way we practice it.
He's showing Ilhan Omar here, of course. That's low-hanging fruit for Tucker Carlson, a woman of color, Muslim, refugee, of course, again, hitting all of the talking points for him.
Immigration has become dangerous to this country. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, herself a symbol of America's failed immigration system.
In fact, Ilhan Omar is a sign and a symbol of the brilliance and the excellency of America and the immigration system, as Ilhan Omar was a refugee from Somalia and has ascended and has lived the American dream now and represents the American people from Minnesota in the halls of Congress. That is quite literally the definition of the American dream, but these people don't care about that.
Can a single human being actually be as loathsome as Ilhan Omar is? It's hard to believe. Diddy Montel Williams, is something that's within her range of experience. Is she good at it? We can't say, but she's done it. Just for masochistic reasons, can you just...
Now he's talking about Kamala Harris.
One more time. So it might be time for Joe Biden to let us know what...
Now talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Ketanji Brown Jackson's LSAT score was.
Which nobody has ever asked the LSAT score from any other justice, But of course, if you're allegedly having sexual misconduct, Clarence Thomas, Brett Kavanaugh, that's fine. If you are not disclosing your financial interests, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, I'm sure, Brett Kavanaugh as well, and I'm sure Amy Coney Barrett's probably not clean there either.
How else you doing the LSATs? They think that you should be elevated in America based on what you do, on the choices you make, not on how you're born, not in your DNA, because that's Rwanda. Rwanda. We're still not precisely sure how George Floyd died. Very few unarmed black men are killed by white cops these days. Where's George Floyd when you need him? The only job training program this administration has gotten behind in 2.5 years is getting black people to sell more weed in the cities. You never...
Yeah. Let me just point out quickly, too, here. Besides the obvious racism, the obvious dog whistles, and they're not even dog whistles, they're pretty glaring. And I'm going to preempt what he's about to say, too. But cities have job training that are funded by either city, state, or federal government that provide all races, all genders opportunities to go to school, to get better jobs, to join unions, to join trades. But this guy is a faux populist. He does not want you to get a job that pays more. He does not want you to unionize. He does not want you to advocate for yourself. That's why he works for an outlet like Fox News, or he did, to undercut you and tell you that he's for you while he's undercutting you all throughout the time that he is spewing his nonsense. Now he's going to utilize Malcolm X to be a racist and misuse and misquote Malcolm X, as the Republicans have really loved to start to do, as they've probably never read about Malcolm X. They've never read his autobiography. They've never read his speeches or listened to his speeches. They know nothing about him other than he is a black man during the civil rights era, and we can utilize some of his words out of context.
See politicians transition into say Malcolm X. Why is that? Maybe because Malcolm X didn't talk like a sharecropper. Xenophobia. It seems almost antique. This show, more than any other show on television, has taken an aggressive position in favor of colorblind equality and against racism.
All right, so that's enough of his bullshit. But I mean, there you have it. Tucker Carlson wasn't fired for a text message, although again, the text message is pretty bad. Let's dive into the Writers Guild strike. And I'll quickly go over it, but I want to talk about this clip, and we will. I'm just pulling it up. Okay. So the Writers Guild, of course, represents writers for TV and movies. And if you don't know, actors don't make up their lines. People that are comedians like Stephen Colbert don't make up their monologues. They might have input. They might be in the writer's room. Someone like Bill Burr works in the writer's room for, the cartoon that he works on, or that he had worked on previously, F is for Family. You have people that do this stuff and they work with the writers. They're in the writer's room. But for the most part, actors read what is written for them. They interpret a script that is created with writers and directed by a director. Seems simple enough. The Writers Guild is seeking better pay, better benefits, and they are unionized, so they have every right to do so. But what happens is, now that there will be shows and movies that are delayed, there will be productions that are live that won't go on air, there will be movies that you will see the impact of this, that will blame workers for collectively bargaining. Now, there's a classic meme. I don't have it pulled up. There's a classic meme that every time one of these strikes happens, there's a Simpsons clip that's a bus driver that says, "Don't make me tap the sign." And the sign says, not in the show, but in the Twitter multiverse, it says, "Strikes are supposed to be disruptive." A strike is meant to be disruptive, and if you don't understand why, that is how workers have leverage. If all the accountants in the world went on strike on April 15th, do you know how crazy that would be? Now, accountants aren't unionized. That's not a plausible thing right now. But to advocate for better healthcare, better vacation time, which all these are reasonable things, better pay, better residuals. Because remember, if you're a writer, you might get paid a salary. You might not have an investment in the long-term success of a show beyond just coming back and writing on another season or whatever. This is why labor power is important. This is why striking is a tool for the labor movement and for working class folks. To withhold your labor is one of your biggest bargaining chips that you have as a regular person. So we will see movies and shows that will be impacted, and we don't know how they will be fully impacted, but they will be. So here is this guy, Adam Conover, who is I think it's that show Adam Ruins Everything, which I've never watched, but I just know him from the YouTube, or I think it's on the same channel as Impractical Jokers, which some of you in chat may be big Impractical Jokers fans, if I know correctly. But here he is on CNN talking about the Writers Guild strike.
That run this industry that say, look, times are changing. We are not making as much money as we once did. This is not the golden era of television, although some of us would argue the shows are great. What do you say to them?
So I'd point out the fact that David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, which is, the parent company of the network I'm talking to you on right now, was paid $250 million last year, $250 million. That's about the same level as what 10,000 writers are asking him to pay all of us collectively, all right? So I would say if you're being paid $250 million, Ted Sarandos made about $50 million last year. These companies are making enormous amounts of money. Their profits are going up. It's ridiculous for them to plead poverty when the writers who are making their shows, some of them are not able to pay their rent or their mortgages. I literally know writers who have had to go on assistance because they have not been able to make their year. If you look at these companies, they're making more money than ever. It's the people who make the shows for them that are making less.
Adam Conover, thank you so much for coming on because you ruined everything. You may have just ruined my career, but I don't mind. Appreciate you coming on.
That's at least the host is at least kind of making a joke about it, but that's true. It's true. This collective bargaining action will make people uncomfortable, will get people mad. But here's another show a little bit of it.
These issues were issues we
that was super loud, sorry. Probably blew everyone's ears out.
Should have addressed 3 years ago, but because of the pandemic, the writers graciously agreed to not pursue it. And in those 3 years, streaming has only taken up a bigger share of the market, while the other ancillary outlets, distribution outlets, have only gotten smaller and smaller. So the issue's blown up into even a bigger, more important one for writers to get a more fair share of streaming.
And how long are you and the Guild prepared to hold out against the studios?
I think the Guild is totally resolved in this issue, and they view it as an existential moment in sort of the history of writer income. So,
never a dull moment on the picket line.
Pardon?
Never a dull moment on the picket line.
Yeah, no, this is amazing how many people are here.
So here's what the summation of the rest of the clip is. I just wanted to show you what it's like, what they're doing, what they're doing out there, what it's like being on the strike or being on the picket line. They, as creators, and this might go beyond the writers. I think there are certain levels of probably the actors don't know. There's people that don't know, and they don't have access to real hard numbers as to how a show performs. So let's just say I am a writer for The Simpsons, because, that's one of my favorite shows. I might not have access to Disney Plus to understand how the streaming for the show does, the new shows do. Or let's just say I'm for HBO and I'm working on the Sopranos reboot and I'm casting myself as Tony Soprano. But besides the point, if I'm a writer on it and I don't have access to the statistics, then I can't possibly know what my bargaining power is. And there's no legitimate reason for them not to share it with the people that create the show. Now, it might not have to be public. It might not have to be something that's shared everywhere. But of course, they brag about it when it's useful, but they hide it from people when it's necessary. And yes, Mickey, I will not be recasting the most Irish-looking guy as Tony Soprano. Don't worry. Even though I am Italian. It is good to see collective bargaining like this. Now, Speaking of somebody that advocates for collective bargaining, let's see. I think hopefully the video is in here. But if it's not, I will read to you what he said. Okay, I'll read it to you. This is from The Guardian. It's a report on, and sorry for all the ads everywhere. Okay. This is actually not even really, this is why I kind of wish I could maybe, here. Let me see if I can pull up the clip. Because it is not what he said, really, but people are blowing it out of proportion. But I want to defend, I actually want to take a look at both, like what he actually said and what they're saying he said. Which, see if I can find it. There's an ad for chicken. Might have to wait for the ad for chicken to be over. Here we go.
Should not exist. So are you basically saying that once you get to $999 million that the government should confiscate all the rest?
I'm saying that we should go back to a very progressive tax policy like what we had under Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Which would mean that
a Republican, by the way.
Over $1 billion, basically it all goes to the government.
You may disagree with me, but
over $1 billion per year they're talking about.
Fine. Yeah, I think people can make it on $999 million.
You're saying.
So there you have the actual clip. And it's being reported as saying, like, oh, he wants to confiscate everything over $1 billion, which, if you believe that billionaires shouldn't exist, it's not the worst possible thing to say. But at the same time, what he's actually saying is, let's go back to a 50s era tax policy, which the top marginal bracket was, look this up, 91%. And that marginal bracket was over $400,000, which today would be closer to $10 million, I believe, adjusted for inflation and all this other stuff. I mean, it's somewhere in the couple $1 million, and we can say, okay, maybe it's not 90%, maybe it's 70%, or I'd be okay with saying it's 50%, getting less on reductions, like kind of saying there's an alternative minimum tax to say that this is the percent no matter what, say like that's the way it goes. But Bernie is saying this, and he's saying over $1 billion per year, which is also not $999 million. It is $999 million, $999,000 and 99. Not the numbers just keep going on. I'm even confusing myself. There's a lot of nines. So basically missing almost one extra $1 million, which of course you and I probably don't earn $1 million in 10 years. A lot of us. So for Bernie to say, even if he said 100%, which he's not saying 100%, really, he's saying the 50s. If he said 91%, over $1 billion, that means that there are only a certain few. I'm going to do some quick math, okay? Billionaires in the U.S. There are 735 billionaires in the United States. Number of billionaires in the U.S. that make $1 billion per year. Let's see what we can find on here. I'll show you what I'm looking at while we do this. So we saw, increases, of course, throughout COVID. On. Oh man, I would love to see this statistic. Oh man. Okay, so for those listening, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at this website because this is some real-time fact checking. But don't have it. I'm not gonna waste more time on it. But if there are only 700 people, 735 people that are billionaires at all in America, 735. Let's do this. Calculator time. 735 divided by 350, not thousand, million. That would mean that there are 0.00000021. So that would be one. So 0.000021. Oh my God, I'm having a brain fart. There'd be 0.00021. So minus 2 zeros, basically, because there's a lot of zeros here, of the population that would be affected by this. 0.00021% of the population. Not the 1%, not the 0.1%, not the 0.01%, 0.0001%. And that's not even really accurate because not every billionaire makes $1 billion per year. $1 billion means that you have net wealth of $1 billion. So if we're realistic about this and we take Bernie's word for it, and I do, that he's not just trying to confiscate all of people's money, that a tax that goes back to the 1950s, the most prosperous time economically in American history, by the way, it is within reason to say we should go back to those tax policies and probably be better off for it. Because wealth inequality is a malignant disease eating and eroding at American society. Not just American society, but inequality and wealth inequality specifically are really endemic to a large issue in America. But with that being said, that's all I have for you tonight. If you guys enjoyed the show, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Like I said, we are inching towards 150 subscribers, which is faster than we got to 100. So we'll keep going and keep growing. And then we get to 150, we'll go to 200. And we'll keep doubling. And I'm going to be going to Dublin. And while you are subscribing, hit the thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. We will have clips coming out twice a week. You can follow the show on Instagram, on TikTok, and on Facebook, Greater Society Media. You can follow me on Twitter at Connor OHanlon, and you can support the show as little as $3 a month at patreon.com/Greater Society Media. Be on the lookout for what is coming up moving forward. I am working on a few things outside of the show, but will help the show, hopefully, and will help with some other projects that are coming up. Last but not least, unless there's something that changes, next week I plan on interviewing Central Bucks School Board candidate in Region 8, Susan Gibson. She's the Democratic candidate, and if you guys would like to see that and learn more about the Central Bucks School Board, be sure to bring your questions to that one, because I'm sure that there are a few. Just a few. But if you would like to, get a preemptive question in, be sure to head on over to the Discord server, which is linked in the description box below. But until next time, everyone, stay safe. Peace.